Yes, St John Ambulance in the UK have been very much driving the move to compulsory first aid training. We believe that no one should die because they needed first aid and didn't get it. And with the very basic first aid skills, you can be the difference between a life lost and a life saved. Last year, we looked to do community projects each year. We'd been doing one where we aimed to train over 1,000 people with basic first aid. Last year we decided, because some of the schools, a couple of the schools on the island, primary schools, actually engaged with us to do first aid in their schools. That obviously is a cost because we have trainers and they're paid trainers. And I went to our Board of Trustees and said, as our next community project, I'd like to offer free first aid training to Year 6 pupils. They agreed to fund it, and we started November time last year and invited schools to apply for a day first aid training. I think we did about 27 schools, and this year, the school year, we've secured funding following a fundraising day at the NSC, the It's a Knockout Day, where we had the likes of the Chief Minister in pink riding a bucking bronco. But apart from the fun, they also were taught basic first aid before they started. So what we are offering the schools now is a day for their Year 6 pupils, and they do the basic first aid, such as simple bandaging, but also recognising such things as allergic reactions, what to do if someone has chest pains, and in the worst case scenario, cardiac arrests. Last year, we've got instances, and I obviously can't say which ones they are because of patient confidentiality, but some of the children who received that training put it to very good use. Someone had a fit and they knew what to do. Someone choked, they knew what to do. And it does work. And we're convinced that it should be part of the curriculum. But we know that things don't always move that quickly. We know there's a restriction on the funding, and we know also the curriculum is quite heavily loaded. So we felt a day or 2 half days, depending on the schools, we'll provide it. We put trainers in. The project is led by a former primary head teacher, and she's assisted by mainly by one other person who's a qualified teacher, and they're supported by St John trainers. And it doesn't cost the schools a penny, or the department.
How have children, parents and teachers reacted to the introduction of first aid in school?
From the feedback we've had, they think it's a brilliant idea. Young children, it's something different for them to do, and they get a day where they're immersed, or 2 half days where they're immersed in first aid, and they do love it.
And what's the youngest age? Is Year 6 the youngest age of children that will be taught first aid?
Yeah, I mean, we'd like to do it for every year in school, but that's just not practical. But we opted for Year 6 because at that age they tend to be a little bit more independent from parents. They'll be out playing on their own, and that's when accidents happen. One of the things they're taught to do is how to make a 999 call. You might think that's a silly thing, but they do know what to do. And the control room have noticed that when they've had young people on, they're far better at making that 999 call than a member of the public who's never done one.
In terms of you've mentioned the 999 call, and also some of the being able to recognise a cardiac arrest and what to do if someone's having a fit. In terms of teaching people that young, how do you teach children to remain calm in a moment of potential quite dramatic panic?
It's a very good question, but I think if people have that basic knowledge of what's happening and what they need to do, it's the knowledge kicks in. It's only afterwards do you think, oh blimey, Anyone who's been trained in first aid and they come to their first incident where they've got to use that training, it will be, that's what I need to do. And it's afterwards you sit back and you think, gosh, I really did do that.
And in terms of an education point of view, what's the driving force behind the urgency to teach first aid to students now?
I don't think there is a driving force behind the urgency, but I think there should be. I'm very supportive of this, and the fact that England are now putting it into their curriculum as a mandatory thing is something I think we should be not only seriously considering, but actually doing. Because saving a life is probably the single most important potential thing you could do. And I think I'd read an article where they'd surveyed the students in the UK, and 86% of them felt that's the most important thing they could learn at school, which tells you.
And that's coming from the students.
Yeah.
And I think I read the same article as you, and people in the UK, it said, have been campaigning for this for 10 years. Why do you think it's taken so long to introduce something that is, by the sounds of it, the most vital thing you can learn?
Absolutely. I mean, to me, it is a no-brainer. And I think it should be in the curriculum from day one, really, from reception classes, and teach it through, because people like John Ambulance could train teachers to teach the children in stages throughout their school.
St John have various schemes where we currently train most of the professional staff, the teachers, the education support workers in basic first aid. It's part of their, every 3 years they'll do it. And I hope that in this day of making cuts, that's not something that disappears, because the teachers then know what to do. Again, a case some years ago, a teacher had gone on one of our training courses, back at school the next day, at home time, in the playground. Mum comes, gives the child a sweet. The child starts choking on the sweet. The mum panics, but the teacher went into first aid mode. And afterwards, she went, I couldn't believe I'd do it. So it is important, and I think the island's got an education bill that hopefully one day will get to come to fruition. But because it's not finalised, I think it would be really good to see that as a requirement on the schools. Because if schools are trying to manage their budget, you don't get a GCSE in first aid, and people are looking for exam results. But there's more to that. It's making the person a valued member of the community. And if you've got basic first aid, even if you were trained as an 11-year-old, at 16 you come across someone who's fitting, someone who's got chest pain, someone who's broken a bone, you know the basics.
Yeah. But frankly, even young children, they may not actually be able to carry it out, but they could help an adult. They could phone for 999. They could recognise the need to do that.
Yeah. St John have a group which is called the Badgers, and that starts at 5, and they're taught basic first aid as well as other things that 5-year-olds want to learn about. And there are things that a 5-year-old can do. We've had one of our cadets save their mother's life because they knew what was going wrong. They put her into what's called a recovery position, and if they do that, they can move anybody. They can move me into the recovery position.
Some of the Scandinavian countries have been doing this for 30 years. And they have some of the highest survival rates outside of hospital for cardiac arrest in the world.
Yes.
So it's proven that actually we can all make a difference as long as we know what to do. I think having defibrillators,
the public access
dotted
defibrillators
about
are
now
great.
everywhere. Yeah. But we need to train people to have the confidence to use them. That's the most important thing. Yeah. And if we can do that as children, then
get them early.
That's
logical,
it, isn't it?
Yeah.
And also it builds their confidence in other ways, the fact that they feel they can do something.
Realistically, how long do you... Well, firstly, do you think the Isle of Man is going to make first aid a compulsory part of our curriculum? And how long do you think it could take?
I can't answer those questions. All I could say is, as a department member, I will be pushing for this to happen. I think we would have to include it in secondary legislation, actually, not in the education bill itself, alongside the curriculum or in the curriculum order. But that's, this is one of the priorities for me. I feel is that we must get this established in schools as soon as we can.
How have the education department reacted to it?
I haven't discussed it, really. That nothing's come up at department meetings, so it's not something that's. As we work now, it's up to individual schools whether they take things like this into their schools. So I guess you have to negotiate with each head teacher as to whether you can come into the school and
basically what we do is last week we sent out an email to all the heads of the primary schools and invited them to take the option up of having first aid taught. The response so far has been very good. Quite a lot of positive responses. From our point of view at St John, we'll continue to do this into the future. It's not something that I want to see stop next year, the year after. We plough back into the community money that we make through our commercial training, and all the money that we raise on the island stays on the island. So to me and to the senior management team at St John, we all agree that it's vital for young people to be given this. Now, if the department isn't going to do it, we'll continue to do it.
And just finally, how many young people do you think are first aid trained at the moment?
From last year, we're looking at about 650. Those schools that didn't opt to do it, they do some first aid training themselves. But all of the young people in year 6 attend Crucial Crew every year, and there they get some very basic first aid. So you could say that 900 people have a basic idea.
Do you think there's an importance in it, Don, though, that there's a continuity as they go through? Because, I mean, I did some first aid training, years ago, but would I be confident? Well, you'd make an effort, wouldn't you? But would I be confident to carry it out correctly?
Yes.
No. I think it's something that has to be kept continuous,
But even for someone as young as you, the fact that you've had the basic training, if you were faced with that situation, 90% of what you learned on your course would come back to you.